All right, we're live. We're back. After some technical difficulties yesterday, we're back. We're live. We're officially on the airwaves now.
We're here. The last couple of weeks, I had been working with Skip Bayless. It was just like an internship thing. He didn't offer a lot of money, but it was a good amount of money, and it was nice to just get to know him. And I really got
Absolutely.
I really got to have like a lot of one-on-one time with Skip, and he showed me a lot of things.
Yeah.
And
Living room
I
is very nice, right?
yeah.
You
Oh my God.
understand?
I'll just say this: the great thing about that one-on-one time with Skip is that you just feel when you leave there, you feel so like clean. You feel so like you did nothing wrong ever in your life, and he really like cleanses you physically and mentally. So who knows? The Football Lounge, brought to you by Skip Bayless, could be on the way. We don't know.
It's funny that you went that direction because I haven't gotten far enough in the weeds yet of course, for those of you that couldn't pick up on Mark's sarcasm, he was not spending time with Skip Bayless, but there was an FS1 lawsuit that was filed by an employee, basically alleging a lot of sexual harassment and a lot of favors for jobs up the chain. The portions I had read about
was all about Joy Taylor,
Emmanuel Acho, and
so what's interesting,
the executive of Fox Sports. I forget his name, but
to my knowledge, Dan, and that's the funny thing is like the main heart of the lawsuit. The only reason there's a lawsuit is it's because it's against Skip Bayless. Like it's a hairdresser.
Then I heard that she filed one against Fox Sports and then one civil lawsuit directly against Skip.
Yeah, I think it was like a workplace thing against Fox Sports, and then that's why she included all the Joy Taylor stuff because it's showing like, hey, this is a workplace where clearly the leadership was letting things happen that shouldn't be happening. Her accusations of Joy Taylor and all that, again, all allegedly. And then the thing with Skip Bayless allegedly was a bunch of, coming on to her. She was a hairdresser, and allegedly Skip Bayless offered her $1.5 million to sleep with her at one point in time. And it's really, to me, if you really want to get in the weeds in this and just love the drama, I don't necessarily endorse Jason Whitlock for a lot of things, but Jason Whitlock, the former FS1 employee who was fired because of the rise of Emmanuel Acho, he's been going off on his show. And so I've been watching clips of that, and I'll just say he's making it sound like no duh, like of course this was going to come out at some point in time. He didn't know exactly that Skip had offered 1.5 or whatever allegedly, but it's what a fun thing. Also, I think it's just really funny because if you're a avid listener of the Football Lounge, my two favorite sports things to consume are Pardon My Take, Big Cat, PFT, Hank, and then also Colin Cowherd. I consume them both daily, like I don't miss like an episode of Pardon My Take, and I try to watch as much and listen to as much Cowherd as possible. At the very end of the lawsuit, Colin Cowherd gets listed as basically just saying like nice and respectable.
He's I think the funniest thing to come out of this entire lawsuit is that all of the memes and all of the posts about people finding pictures of Colin Cowherd from years and years ago with female employees where he respectfully has, the closed fist around the shoulder and keeping his distance and everything like that, trying to be as respectful as possible. It's hilarious. Like everyone's like, this guy, this is the look of a face of a man who could have been named in a lawsuit negatively, but he's too polite and respectful.
Dude, think about the panic. Think about the panic you would get, and you and your lawyers would get when that lawsuit comes out. You're like, there's a 47-page sexual harassment lawsuit against FS1. He's probably reading through every page like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What are they going to say something about me? I didn't do anything. If he's saying I didn't do anything, but you're panicking, then you get to the very end, you read like, oh, nice and respectful.
Nice and respectful. It's beautiful.
Well,
beautiful
we're gonna try and have a nice and respectable show back here. We appreciate everyone being with us. I've been off a couple of weeks. Appreciate you holding down the fort. Ready to recap the end of the regular season. And Dan, we are blessed with some incredible football. I know we don't talk college football on the show, but Thursday night, tomorrow night, and Friday night college football playoff games. Then Saturday, NFL football, Sunday, NFL football, Monday, NFL football. We got 5 straight days of just some really exciting literal playoff football in both college and the NFL. So I'm ready for it.
Yeah, no, it's a good time to be watching football and sitting back. Thankfully, I have, Prime and some of these other, but we'll get into that. Like, this is becoming a thing where consuming football is going to be very different, and it's hard. It already is. We heard, I don't know if you saw, or you did, because you were in the text chain.
Meth Streams,
our beloved Meth Streams is going away.
I never use Meth Streams.
No, never once. No. Just simply knew about it.
I shamed other people for doing it.
Yeah, that's terrible stuff. But yeah, no, we're gonna go through a quick kind of lightning round of the NFL teams that are not in the playoffs, because this will be the last that we talk about them unless there's a head coaching hire of some sort. We have had a couple firings since the NFL season ended. So we'll go through those teams, and then we're going to get ourselves into the wild card preview and look at all of these games coming up this weekend. So let's dive in. All right. So the really fun part of the show is when you get to talk about the 3-13 New York Football Giants. I think that's an appropriate place for us to start here, Mark, as we kind of give our end of season report card breakdown, so to speak. The New York Giants on the end of the year, I said 3-13. I'm back to the 16 game schedule. 3-14 is the final there for the New York Giants, and they amazingly do not have the number 1 overall pick. We'll get to that later. But a lot of teams very poor this year in the NFL, although it could have been a lot worse. At one point, there was like 4 2-win teams and like 5 3-win teams that looked like the top 10 was all going to be 3-win or less. But nonetheless, New York, obviously, they end up trading or releasing Daniel Jones towards the end of this season. They have committed to keeping Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, so that is going to be intact, which is probably the biggest news for this team going forward. They know what the infrastructure is that they have in place. Malik Neighbors, probably the lone bright spot this year for this team. That seems to be a great fit for them. Offensively. Yeah, fair enough. So just kind of looking as a whole, what's your take on the New York Giants and, what prospects they have moving forward?
Yeah, really quickly, a disappointing season for the Giants. I don't think any of us thought it would unravel this poorly. I do think I like them keeping Daboll. As you know, I've been a Daboll guy. I'm surprised they keep the GM because of all the Hard Knock stuff. I will say the Giants to me are a really interesting team because they really feel like they're the team that like absolutely needs a quarterback, right? Like Cleveland has Deshaun Watson. I would agree they kind of need a quarterback, but like they don't have a guy in their roster right now at all that they could go into the season with. The problem is if you're Daboll, you're probably saying to yourself, find me a way to go get a guy like Sam Darnold as opposed to starting with a rookie and then, struggling through the slide. I don't think that they can afford to lose games because as the owner Mara said, like, I'm anxious and they need to turn it around and my patience is wearing thin. That's a terrible spot to be in. It feels almost like it could be a lame duck year. And so we'll see what kind of miracle they throw, whether it's trying to draft a quarterback or go out and get aggressive for a quarterback, because they got pieces. This defense isn't too far away. They have Malik Neighbors. They need to work on the other skill positions and then figuring out a quarterback. I believe in Daboll. Daboll will be a guy I'd want to interview. Again, I've said that multiple times if he had been fired.
The New Orleans Saints are next. They finished the season 5-12. They fired their head coach, so they're in a head coaching search, of course. Derek Carr, the quarterback there, at least for now. We're not entirely sure what's going to happen with that situation. Another disappointing year for New Orleans because it was such a gettable division. But it's been a few years of Dennis Allen where you're like, hey, there's something that you can do with this team. I mean, they have a pretty solid defense. You have a professional quarterback that can play football at a high level in the NFL. You've got weapons in Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller and on the outside. They just couldn't put it all together. And obviously with the firing, that kind of signaled things. Derek Carr, gets hurt, and then you're just going through this kind of, carousel of quarterbacks. It doesn't appear that they have their quarterback of the future on the roster, Mark. Spencer Rattler, you kind of hoped maybe would show some flashes. He did a few times, but probably not enough to warrant any faith.
Yeah, the problem with the Saints, even though they're 5-12, they're picking 9th. So this is one of those really weird years. We have a lot of teams that have won 10 or more games. We have a lot of teams that have won 5 or less games. And so usually 5 wins get you like a top 5 pick. This year, 5 wins for the Bears, for the Jets, for the Panthers, the Saints. You're looking at picks 10, 9, 8. It's not great in that way. For example, the Bears won 7 games last year and they picked 9th. They won 5 games this year and they're picking 10th. So the Saints are in that weird realm of like, okay, what do you do? A lot of it's going to depend on the head coach, right? I'm someone I know it may sound crazy and Saints fans might think I'm absolutely sane. I think Matt Nagy should absolutely be in play for the New Orleans Saints. And I'll just say this really quickly. If I'm already Ben Johnson's not going to the Saints, I do think Mike Vrabel is giving the Saints an interview. What do the Saints have going for them, right? They're in a winnable, quote-unquote, winnable division, even though Tampa's won it 5 years in a row now or whatever, but quote-unquote winnable division. And I would also argue if you keep Derek Carr, you're not void. Like they're in a better quarterback position today than the New York Giants we just talked about. So a lot of us is decide where they go with the head coach. I think they need to go back to their offensive in the dome, high-flying offense. You have Chris Olave. You still have Alvin Kamara. That's what you need to build this team around. And I do think a Matt Nagy-type person is someone who deserves another chance, like gets rehabilitated back with Andy Reid, learn from his mistakes in Chicago. And I'm saying this a lot in criticism of my own organization. Coaches who were bad Matt Nagy led the Bears to playoffs 2 of his 4 years. And the Bears haven't sniffed the playoffs since he left. The Bears have been an utter disaster since he left. I do think there's something to him helping an organization like that get back to their offensive roots, because maybe Joe Brady, you'll start to see where the pieces fall. I just don't know how attractive a job it is. But I do think they should lean offense.
Well, with the contracts the way they are nowadays, assistant coaches are making more than ever as well. And so for someone like Ben Johnson, you are in a situation where you can choose your destination, because he's perfectly fine
staying in Detroit.
Have the perfect fit, staying in Detroit.
He did it already.
Smith, he's mentioned the same thing. He said, I'm happy in Pittsburgh. Like I won't leave unless it's a perfect fit,
Yeah.
So there are becoming more of these, you have to also be selling it. You're not just selling an opportunity to play head coach in this league. You have to actually sell your organization to guys. And that's why, something like New Orleans, they do have a leg up on some other organizations because they have a really good fan base. They have a history of winning. They have a Super Bowl championship in recently enough. Good stadium and like you mentioned, beatable division.
I will say this, Dan, really quickly. The Bears lost 10 straight games during the season. New Orleans, remember, was 2-0, and they were the high-flying offense, and they went 3-12 down the rest of the stretch. So wheels fell off. Injuries were a huge part of it. Again, I don't think New Orleans is too far away. The head coaching decision is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, unfortunately for New Orleans, they are right now staring about a $65 million over the salary cap next year. So obviously there's going to be restructures, but restructuring $65 million, that takes a lot of work. So yeah, they're going to have to figure some things out for sure. All right, let's move on to the next team, the Carolina Panthers. I feel like this season ended on such a good note for Carolina.
Great note.
Incredible note. The turnaround, I got to give Dave Canales a ton of credit. And I don't know how much it is Dave Canales. I think Bryce Young obviously deserves all the credit for his resurgence as well. I think the pairing is just proved to be a pretty good one. And I also think that Bryce Young has at least shown the ability to be a professional quarterback in the National Football League where, he had the demeanor going in, but now you're actually seeing him execute on the field in that way. And it turns out, I think that benching early in the year was a huge benefit. Just gave him the reset he needed. Then he could come in and not have to be the savior of a team that was already doomed, right? Yeah. he just got to come in and play football. I think if you're Carolina, you got to be feeling great about where you're at now, because at least you can breathe. You have a high enough pick, and you can say, we've got our guy, and now we're moving forward, and we think maybe we've got our head coach too.
No, absolutely. So here's what I would say if I'm Carolina. It's so weird to be so positive after a 5-12 season.
Yeah.
But because it was such a low bar and where they started, you absolutely are right. They got to be feeling good. You now know you're not in the quarterback market. That's a good feeling. You're going to give Bryce Young this full next year. Now, again, in a year from now, if you're 5-12 again and it's the same production from Bryce Young, that's when you have to really start saying to ourselves, are we going to pay him big money to keep him, right? Or can we maybe get him on a Baker level deal? Will he take way less and stay as our starter, and we can build a monster around him? Because you're seeing in the NFC South, that division right now has a lot of quarterbacks who are on team-friendly deals, or they're not paying them a lot of money, because even Derek Carr's now contract isn't that big of an issue. The problem is the Saints have overspent around him. But Tampa and Atlanta, they're not paying Michael Penix, but they have one more year of a lot of money due to Kirk Cousins. So if you're Carolina, you've got to try to jump on the fact that you're not paying Bryce Young anything, and hopefully he can produce again at this Tua-esque level. It seemed at the end of the season he was hitting that stride to be like, okay, we see what we project to be with is his ceiling is Tua. If your ceiling is Tua, we've seen Tua make the playoffs if you can stay healthy. Now, does that mean you can win a Super Bowl? I don't know, probably not, especially when you look at all the talented quarterbacks in this NFL. But you'd much rather be feeling good about that until you have to pay Bryce Young, and that's still a couple years away. They've got to keep Adam Thielen because he's just so valuable as a veteran receiver, and it seems like him and Bryce have a good connection. And then just continue to put money into weapons and pass rushers. Like, just rush the passer in that division and then give him another weapon or two.
Yeah, I mean, Chuba Hubbard really came into his own this year and got an extension because of it. They have Jonathan Brooks, who unfortunately suffered another torn ACL, but he's a very promising young player. Xavier Legette had some really good moments. Yeah. Jalen Coker, they have a lot of really young skill players that have been pretty good.
Remember in the offseason, they spent $100 million on their guards. Well, their offensive line held up this year, especially late in the season. I want the Bears to spend $100 million on guards this year. That's
yeah, no kidding.
It seems as though what they did was they put some building blocks in place and they handled a really tough start. Shout out to Dave Canales. Again, I don't know what the ceiling is. We're giving a lot of praise to a team that went 5-12, but overall the vibes and the arrow is definitely pointed in the upward direction. Where last year it was like a tire fire in the basement.
Definitely a lot of that driven by the low expectations. I'll grant you that for sure. The Chicago Bears coming up next. Your Chicago Bears finished the year 5-12. Yeah, I know we had talked a lot about the Bears going into the season after they obviously made the picks that they did, getting Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze in the first round. My question to you is, I think you had alluded to this. This is still somewhat close to an ideal scenario, right? Because you had mentioned if the season ended poorly and you lost a bunch of games, got a high pick, but you found out you had your guy. Ultimately, that's what mattered the most, right? Yeah, I guess the worst part of it is that the firing of Eberflus, the whole handling of everything was kind of fumbled. And, Caleb obviously went through some real low lows throughout the year. So that's not ideal. But yeah, I mean, you'll take this as a Bears fan, right? You know that you've got your guy for sure.
Well, listen, I love Caleb. And I think as time and we move away from the season, more and more the stats are coming out. You look at, he had a better statistical year than CJ Stroud. If you look at where he actually ranks and how he played, especially fourth quarter stats, I mean, he was phenomenal. Did he put up the numbers? No, but he wasn't too far off of Jayden Daniels or Bo Nix. And you look at what he dealt with, the firing of his head coach, the firing of his offensive coordinator before his head coach got fired, 3 offensive coordinators in his rookie year. And he had only 6 interceptions.
Emaciated O-line.
Yeah. And the most sacks, second most sacks in NFL history in a season. And the dude played all 17 games. First Bears quarterback to start all 17 games since 2009. So, yes, the diva with the pain and nails.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But, yeah, I mean, listen, that was the one thing that killed me on Justin Fields. We talked about it how many years. It's like the dude can't stay healthy. He'd break the finger or tweak the ankle or whatever. Caleb is a lot like Patrick Mahomes, just the way he has that body fluidity So yes, am I pumped about Caleb? I absolutely am. Am I obviously, like I always feel like with my team, it's a nightmare from the top down. And now going through this coaching search, it's already again showing all the warts of a really dysfunctional franchise. I hope and pray they're able to find someone who can help get the most out of Caleb Williams. And in this division, with 3 top 10 coaches, you got to find someone who you think can dethrone at least one, if not 2 of those guys, right? You can't go in and hire the person and say, well, this guy's probably going to be the fourth best head coach in division. I think Bears fans would agree with me. And when we say we're sick and tired of going into a game knowing we're out coached already, because we're just not a good enough organization with the structure around everything else to be out coached constantly. And we've been out coached for a lot of the last 15 years. I would add on this. We'll talk a lot about the coaching search. I want to get ahead of it now because by the time we record next week, who knows what'll happen. I put this out on my own social stuff. I did it on the TV show this morning, but I want to make it put it out on here. I think there are 4 names that if you told me tomorrow the Bears hired any of the 4, I would be legitimately excited. Those names are Vrabel and Ben Johnson. That's like tier 1, right? Either of those 2 guys is elite. Now, it looks to me like Vrabel's got his pick of the litter, and it looks to me as though with New England and Vegas opening on up, those 2 seem like more situationally better fits for Vrabel, just as far as who he'd be working with and who he'd be writing his checks. I do think the Bears interest him, though, a ton because it's a defensive history culture, and he's got a quarterback. So I'm not writing the Bears off for Vrabel. And the other person, Ben Johnson, obviously, I think he's the best and the brightest of the offensive minds available. And when you want to pair the first overall pick quarterback with that guy. Then the next tier, and these are 2 names that I'm warming up to more and more and more. The more I do my research and the more I hear the names going. Cohen, the offensive coordinator for Tampa. Look at what Baker did this year. 4,500 yards, 41 touchdown passes. And Cohen was a guy who worked with Sean McVay, also then went back to the college game and then went back to Sean McVay before taking the job in Tampa. So he's fluid. He moves. He goes to college, comes to the pros, goes back to college, comes back to the pros. Like he's not afraid to just like get creative with offense. And he's dealt with a guy in a quarterback who's a big personality in Baker, but also someone working with Matt Stafford and Sean McVay. He's been around a lot of smart people. He's young. I think he could be a really bright opportunity for the Bears. And the other one would be Joe Brady. Now, Joe Brady is 4th of 4 on that list, I will say. I do worry a little bit about the youth with Joe Brady. But what I like about Joe Brady is he helped Joe Burrow have his best season ever when he was in college and won the national title. He was the guy behind, Joe Burrow. And Joe Brady was also the guy now behind Josh Allen with this MVP level season, his best season. Now, a lot of people arguing Josh Allen. Who's Joe Brady to get the most out of him? I would argue it's something. Look at how much more Buffalo's committed to the run and the diversity in their passing game since getting rid of Stephon Diggs, and how Shakir and Coleman and all these guys are so involved. The tight end is so involved. The Bears didn't involve their tight ends at all this year. It's the biggest mistake the coaching staff made this year with not getting Cole Kmet and the tight ends involved. So those 4 are the names. There are a couple other names that I'm intrigued by. I wouldn't be like cursing a storm. I hate to say it, but Mike McCarthy is one of them. I think also Pete Carroll, if it's like a 3-year deal or less, and he says kind of like if it's like, a Joe Biden type of thing, like 1 term, like let me try to like just get your organization back on the right page and then turn the keys over to someone. You would be
concerned about then having to go through this all
I would hate to go through it again, years. But if Pete Carroll was like helping you pick the successor and was like then moved into management type of thing, I could maybe be convinced of it. But again, that sounds like a lot. But I think that's better in a lot of ways than the Dolphins defensive coordinator. They're interviewing the Iowa State head coach. So the Bears are, I get it, they're trying to turn over every stone.
Matt Campbell's a good guy. All right.
I also think, Dan, and I just want to put this out there, then we'll move on from the Bears. Put this out there. I do think part of the reason why they're interviewing so many people is because they know they want Ben Johnson and they can't hire Ben Johnson until after the Super Bowl. Right, so it's so I do think part of it is just like, fuck it, we might as well bring that guy in and hear what he has to say about our team and about our organization, knowing that our guy is Ben Johnson. It's who we want to hire. And then if we don't get him and we wait all the way until after the Super Bowl or whenever the Lions are out, and he says no to us and takes another job, well, then we'll have interviewed 20 other people and we'll be really comfortable moving to choices 2, 3, 4. The worry with that, right, obviously, is if a lot of those choices get hired, in the meantime, there's a lot of openings. You leave yourself maybe with your 6th choice. That would be a disaster for the Bears. One of those 4 names would make me pretty excited as a Bears fan. I'll let all the Bears fans react to that in this part of the video coming on up. But overall, yeah, it was a disappointing.
Rex Ryan.
Yeah, no. Overall, really disappointing season because of the expectations. I think we move on from Keenan Allen, but Caleb's the man, and I'm all in on Caleb.
Yeah. The Bears, by the way, did just complete an interview with head coach Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, and they're all by Zoom, which is so dumb. So the Bears had a chance to meet in person with Vrabel and Pete Carroll, and they're doing all of them by Zoom. And I think what we're now learning is because they're doing that is, again, they're trying to say this is going to be a long process for us. First meeting everyone by Zoom because they can only meet Ben Johnson by Zoom. They can only meet Aaron Glenn by Zoom because it's it's annoying because the Jets have already met him in person. The other teams have already met Vrabel in person, but my team is
okay. Vrabel's going to the Pats anyway. I mean, that's pretty much a foregone conclusion, unfortunately.
It feels that way.
San Francisco 49ers finished at 6-11. What a down year for them. Talk about major disappointment. But they're old and they're beat up and they don't really have a difference maker at the quarterback position.
They need retooling, right? Like this is the offseason of retooling. There's going to be a lot of focus on San Francisco. GM and coach are back. That's a no-brainer. So what do they do with Brock Purdy? I don't think they pay him, and I wouldn't pay him. I'd probably franchise tag him, and then I would try to rework the roster as far as the San Francisco 49ers can be aggressive in the draft. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they trade a piece for an extra 2nd or 3rd rounder because they're the type of team that feels like they need like 2 first rounders. You know what I mean? Where they need 2 or 3 young, like 1st, 2nd round picks where they can just inject some youth and speed into this roster. And in a lot of ways, Dan, for a team like San Francisco, I hate to say it, but the twist I would put if I was a Niners fan is this team needs an offseason, like a full offseason. Let Kittle get healthy. Let Debo get healthy. Don't play an extra month and a half of football. Like, just get healthy. They played so much football. Only the Chiefs have played more in the last 5 years. So that's how you sell it. That's the positive. The negative spin is it could be a really tumultuous and ugly offseason.
I mean, it could be the start of the downslide entirely. Who knows? I mean, Kyle Shanahan, for as great as he's been to get them to newer heights, has been able to get over the hump. And if this is the start of the downslide, then you're going to be talking about a significant drought, perhaps, of not winning the championship.
They're picking 11th. So, I mean, they have a chance to either, turn that, like if they trade down, you know what I mean, and go to pick like 19 and 23rd or whatever, like if they could do something like that, I think it'd be really great for the Niners.
The Dallas Cowboys finished at 7-10. Kind of surprisingly, I thought they were going to, bottom out entirely.
I agree.
It was probably going to be better for them, but at the end of the day, Mike McCarthy there. That situation's up in the air. Dak Prescott, it's going to be the guy next year, and so where does this franchise go from here? I guess because they're very top heavy. Right.
Yeah. But absolutely.
There's nothing holding that foundation in place. They have no depth on either side of the ball.
To me, the writing's on the wall because Dak's going to be your quarterback. I think you just bring McCarthy back. I think you extend McCarthy a year if he's willing to take just a year deal. And I think McCarthy would, because as he's shown now, I legitimately think if Mike McCarthy was not re-signed, he will get a head coaching job like this cycle. The guy has won too much. Now, again, it's kind of like signing up for Brock Purdy or Bryce Young as your quarterback. Is the ceiling multiple Super Bowl victories? Probably not. But the ceiling can be, as we saw with Aaron Rodgers, if you have all the right pieces in place, he's stable enough to lead a team with special pieces to a Super Bowl run. He just wins too much in the regular season. Like Mike McCarthy doesn't do a lot of the dumb things that I've seen my franchise do. He makes some mistakes, but overall it's way less, and he runs a tighter ship. I will say overall, Dallas, again, like San Francisco, just feels like they also need to just add 2 or 3 young, exciting pieces to this top-heavy roster. Let Dak get healthy. It's another classic Dallas offseason. I already feel like I can pick them to finish 9-8 next year if they bring McCarthy back. Now, if they let McCarthy go, that job I think becomes really interesting if you are someone like a Joe Brady or a Cohen in Tampa, Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, because it feels like you're not going to hit a floor, right? That feels like the type of job, if you step in, you should win at least 7-8 games. So that kind of guarantees you success, quote unquote, in your first year, which, as we see now, teams now more than ever, because the owners are billionaires, will fire a coach after 1 year. So we'll see what Dallas does the next week, and we'll have a better idea to talk about their offseason coming up.
The Arizona Cardinals finished the season 8-9. At one point, were in control of the NFC West. I don't know. I mean, I think the jury's still out overall on Jonathan Gannon, but I think he's one of those guys that is just kind of like under the radar because he's not, eye-popping, but he's also not one of the worst in the league. And so I think Jonathan Gannon's earned a little bit of runway here.
Oh, yeah.
I think Kyler Murray's an extremely talented quarterback. I just don't think that he has enough of the qualities to overcome, a subpar or even an average roster and situation. I think he needs a lot around him, and he could flourish. He would be ideal for like the Cowboys of like 3 years ago. He would have been a guy or in San Francisco, he would be incredible in San Francisco. But he is the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. And I'm not seeing it from.
No, he's not Lamar. Yeah, he's not Lamar. Wow. He's not Josh. He doesn't do that. Now, if you're telling me that Kyler Murray gets all of a sudden traded to your Pittsburgh Steelers, then I'm like, oh shit, that's interesting. Like, structurally sound organization with a great defense and weapons, right? Like a couple nice pieces. Then you say, all right. The problem is, I agree with you. The Cardinals are just this kind of floating organization that doesn't have like an absolute, like, a bay of statues that showed the history of the Cardinals and the legacy of winning. Yeah. Or like, we don't even know, like, the Cardinals aren't even like the Bears, even though they don't win much, but they can go like, well, they're a defensive team. You know what I mean? Like, what are the Cardinals?
Just like a smaller market overall. Like they're just kind of tucked away,
Yeah, Phoenix is a big city, but I agree with you. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird market.
Probably not top 12 in the NFL though,
As far as fan bases, no. I mean, as far as population, yeah. I think Phoenix is top 10 city population wise.
You think so? I don't know. We got 2 teams in LA. We've got 2 in New York.
Saying Again, I'm saying literally the city of Phoenix population. I think it's like 7th or 8th in the country. Look it up.
Oh, okay.
I'll talk quickly about the. That's all I'm trying to say. Now fan bases, no, I'm not like Cardinals fans don't overtake, the Bears Stadium when they travel to Chicago, right? Sure. So I'll say this: I agree with you completely. I do think you just run it back, and you say to yourself, in a year from now, moving on from Kyler is easy, right? The contract works out that way. In a year from now, moving on from Gannon is easy. The contract 3 years, it'll work out that way. You also, by just running it back next year, you give it an offseason, another full offseason development with him and the weapons. You try to improve the defense a little bit. You try to find a little bit more structural identity. They were good at running the ball at times. Connor got injured late in the season. And you say to Gannon, too, maybe behind closed doors, listen, if you want to keep your job and prove that you're the guy to lead us and Kyler's not our guy, well, you can show us that by doing another 9-8, 8-9 season of holding the ship together and leading the franchise. So I think that's what I would do if I was Arizona, especially because the NFC West right now doesn't feel, vaunted. Like, if you go into a rebuild, you're automatically signing up for 4th place in that division. Now, again, are they 4th place in that division? No, they're ahead of San Francisco. They were better than San Francisco this year. So stay strong, add some pieces on defense, get another pass rusher, shore up that offensive line, and then try to just say to Kyler and Gannon, this is the prove it year. It's a huge prove it year, and maybe they'll rise to the occasion.
I loved that the Falcons made the move to go to Michael Penix at the end of the year because it was clear that it wasn't going to work out with Kirk Cousins. Now, They did end their season on, a 2-game losing streak. But we knew that there was going to be a lot of development required there. Overall, and we talked about this when they signed Kirk Cousins. It's a 4-year contract, but not really.
It's really a 2-year contract.
It's really a 2-year, and they can even get out of a little bit. They're going to obviously have to eat some dead money next year.
Like the Broncos did.
Yes. Yeah. It was a precipitous fall for Kirk. I mean, you could tell all year long. In the first game that I watched, obviously, of him with the game against Pittsburgh, it was pretty clear the guy could barely move. And so I think age has just kind of caught up with him at this point in time. But the Falcons have great weapons. So that's another team that's pretty much well set up for success in the future.
Yeah, Kirk is screwed because he should retire, but he can't, because if he retires, he doesn't get the money. So he needs to play one more year. And what he needs to do is just say, okay, cut me. We'll work the contract like Denver did, and I'll go play for someone to be a backup or a bridge quarterback for $1 million, like Russell Wilson did. And then he'll actually get $60 million, but he'll just be, a bridge or a backup. And then he can ride off into the sunset. For Atlanta, I think the biggest thing for them is they kind of screwed themselves, because we saw at the end of the year, Penix can play. Penix is a good quarterback. Now, again, I don't know how to rank Penix and Maiden start the whole year like Nix and McDaniel, Jaden Daniels, and then I wanted to say McDaniels, Jaden Daniels.
Well, there's too many McDaniels
and
combos in the league. I don't like it.
And so, listen, I don't know how to rank all the rookie quarterbacks right now, but they all look like they can play in this league and be starters in this league. And have all shown flashes of being like high end, maybe top 10 type starters. So Atlanta's got that going for them. The problem is they can't really do much this offseason to add because of the Kirk thing. So they would have loved to have gotten a year and a half out of Kirk. They only got a half a year. That's killer. That's what makes it a bad deal. Atlanta, I expect this offseason to try to get creative to let go of Kirk. Overall, though, still a successful year, I'd argue, because at the end of the year, you're leaving it saying Michael Penix Jr., Bijan Robinson, Drake London, we got our core and we're ready to go.
Yeah. No, I think that's the way to do it. And you just hope that you can get enough development out of Michael Penix next year to set yourself up really for 2026. That's the year to target. They're picking 15th, not the worst. They can still get a really quality player there too. Seattle Seahawks are the final eliminated team in the NFC before we move on to the AFC. They also were a team that, like the Cardinals, had a chance there for the West Division for a few weeks there, but just kind of had a little bit of a collapse. Geno Smith has come down to earth a little bit there. And it's looking like, the split is on the horizon for Geno in Seattle. I just think that they need to move on. The problem is, are they going to be able to do it next year, or are they going to have to wait on another season? But the good news is Jackson Smith-Njigba is a real dude. So they've got a great wide receiver core to work with and a great running back core on top of it too. And McDonald's done great with the defense. So it's
really an interesting team. Like Seattle's going to be really, really interesting to watch how they pan out, because again, it comes down to Geno. The question will be, he's going into the final year of that 3-year deal he signed. And so he's cheap, but do you say to yourself, what else is out there that we can improve on? If I was Seattle, I would look to be the team that maybe moves up in the draft and say, hey, if there's a guy you like a Cam Ward, if there's a guy you're really sold on, like a Shedeur, it doesn't sound like those guys are going to go number 1 overall. It sounds like you might be able to get those guys somewhere if you get in the top 10. So if I was Seattle, I would explore that. And then literally you could sit them with Geno and just say, Geno, last year, we're going to give you the keys to this really great offense again. Go put up big numbers, lead this team. You can show the rookie the way. And then hopefully if you want to keep playing, you'll find somewhere else to keep playing next year, the following year. And the rookie will develop him along without doing like with the Falcons, it was just overspending on Geno. The only other thing I could argue is that sneaky Seattle would be the team. Like if you're an Aaron Rodgers and you get away, you know what I mean? Or if you are Sam Darnold and for some reason the Vikings just say we're going to let you explore, like that's a sneaky good place because the wide receivers are there, the culture's there, the defense is up and coming, and a good running game. So in a winnable, it seems like now a winnable division, which is crazy to say because it seemed like a year ago we were talking about that being maybe the best division in football.
The team with the number 1 overall pick is the Tennessee Titans, and they have the New England Patriots to thank for that, as the Patriots won the final game of the regular season. Tennessee lost theirs, locking up the 1 seed. They'll be in an interesting spot too, because it doesn't seem like Will Levis is gonna be the guy that they're gonna turn to in the future. And so I think they might take a quarterback there, number 1, but I also think it's going to be something that Tennessee might be willing to shop and acquire more.
Absolutely. They should shop it. They don't have a GM though. That's the problem right now. They have a coach. They don't have a GM.
Yeah, they did just fire their GM. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation for Tennessee to be in.
When we look at Tennessee as a whole, never at one point, never during if you would have said me like 6-7 weeks ago, like, oh, is Tennessee going to end up with the first pick? I would have been like, no, they're not the first pick bad. So kind of the way the end of the year shook out for them, they don't have a quarterback on the roster. Listen, 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, I was a little bit more like give Will Levis the time. Who cares about what's his name? Your former Steelers quarterback. Why are we giving him any time? Why are we giving just play Will Levis? But then it became apparent that clearly the coach and the quarterback weren't meshing. Will Levis find a job? I feel like maybe like a Drew Lock, you could just be a guy in this league. Absolutely. You have the arm talent for that. And who knows, maybe he finds a resurgence somewhere. But Tennessee is going to be interesting. Aaron Rodgers, again, if you are Sam Darnold, those are the names I would absolutely consider if you are Tennessee, and then trading that pick. I don't think there's a quarterback right now that I would want to take number 1, but they hold the keys to the draft, so it's a good place to be in.
Yeah. Cleveland Browns 3-14. They pick number 2 overall.
Yeah.
I mean, all things considered, it's a pretty good situation for Cleveland, despite it's a third tire fire. There's no question about it. But they have the number 2 overall pick. I think this is like the most important situation that Cleveland's been in since the signing of Deshaun. They have an opportunity to choose their path. And I have a feeling, Mark, that they're totally cool with just cutting the ties at this point in time. Now, they've got Deshaun next year. I know that. But I don't think that's going to prevent them from exploring taking a quarterback at number 2.
No,
if they love a guy,
They absolutely have to. They have to look into it. They're the team. Thing. And they have Kevin Stefanski. They have a head coach. It's weird when a head coach and that we like so much is just in this bad situation. But I think even the owner is smart enough to know it's not the coach that put us in this position. This is a failure on the organization with Deshaun Watson and everything around it. Now, their roster fell apart too. Chubb didn't come back the way we thought he would. Defensively, it looks like it's just Myles Garrett. If I was Cleveland, I would trade Myles Garrett. I would move other pieces. I would go all in on acquiring draft picks and just starting fresh with Stefanski and a new young quarterback. You feel like you have the coach. If you feel like you can get the quarterback and move some pieces to just you have a wide receiver that you like, who came on with Jerry Jeudy for you late in the year, especially. You have a coach you like. Go get a quarterback that you want to build around, and then go get a bunch of other draft picks and pieces. I hate to move on from Myles Garrett because he's putting together a Hall of Fame career. So maybe they don't. Maybe they can convince him that, hey, this could be a quicker turnaround than you think. But if he wants to request a trade, I think, again, there are teams out there that would give up a first-round pick for Myles Garrett, especially this draft.
It all depends on where you think you're at. Exactly. And if it's time to rebuild, then there's really no point in putting him through that. And
you're just saying that because you want him out of the division.
I would enjoy him being out of the division. Yeah. But in all seriousness, I mean, if the Steelers were in a situation where they were needing to just break it down and build it up, I would trade TJ Watt because you don't want to waste an amazing all-time player when you know it's just not going to be enough. Too. It's just not going to be enough. Yeah. The Vegas Raiders are in another situation where they need a quarterback badly.
They need a coach.
They need a coach now. It's a team that needs a lot of draft picks. Let's be frank. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bad roster. It might be
I
one of the worst in the NFL.
I don't know what to say about Vegas. We're gonna have to wait. Like I
Yeah,
just
they're a
don't know.
weird
Like
team to evaluate.
they need so much. They have Brock Bowers, and that's such an awesome thing for them because he was a stud this year. You know, when he's breaking Mike Ditka records, when you got to go back to when Mike Ditka played in only a 14-game season, he held that record for so long. Mike Ditka's badass. So yeah, I don't know. They're a disaster, and they are again in a really bad spot because you have 3 maybe Hall of Fame coaches in your division, and 2 incredible quarterbacks, and 1 quarterback that seemingly is simpatico with his Hall of Fame level coach. That's a bad spot to be in if they're the Raiders.
Yeah, no, the Raiders are going to have to lean into being the Raiders more than ever, and being that, you know, dark horse, the black sheep of the division, and just rally around their identity. But they haven't had an identity really for several years.
Oh.
New England Patriots are 4-13. They do seem to have found their quarterback. Go ahead, fire Gerard Mayo. That thing was kind of bungled, I think, overall. But I still completely endorse the decision. They're going to get Mike Vrabel. I'm very confident of that. And if that's the case, then it was the right move by Robert Kraft. Whether or not he didn't do right by Gerard Mayo, that's beside the point. It's about doing what's right moving forward, and what's right moving forward is getting a guy like Mike Vrabel when he's available, because he's not going to be available.
Go get Vrabel. You have Drake May, and no, that's all Vrabel's wanted. He begged for it in Tennessee for years. Remember, he was the one who decided I'm benching Marcus Mariota. And when they went to Tannehill, they won the playoff game. The next year they were the number 1 seed. They hosted the AFC Championship game. The year after that, they again won the division. Went into the second round of the playoffs. Vrabel,
when he got fired.
I know, because again, I was just the owners, and then it was a pride thing because he's a big rub it in your face, aggressive personality. He's not going to worry about that with Robert Kraft because they have such a close relationship already. He's a Patriots Ring of Honor Hall of Fame guy. So it's a great fit. And if you're Mike Vrabel, you got to be jumping for joy. Still take all the interviews because you want Robert Kraft to pay out the wazoo, and you want all the guarantees you want to get. And I do think you owe it to yourself to see
his price.
Yeah, you do owe it to yourself to see what's out there. So I think the Patriots are going to be one of those teams, like right now, book it. If you can get the over wins on them now before they sign Vrabel, do it, because I think the Patriots are a team that could go from a 4-win team to a 9-win team next year based on Vrabel alone. They have a ton of cap space. You add a couple weapons for Drake May, that team's going to be already like better than the Jets and probably better than the Dolphins next year in that division. I would feel it.
Jacksonville finished with 4 wins too. They just fired Doug Peterson. They have the 5th overall pick. Are they a team that's a candidate to quickly go from 4 wins to 9?
I can't remember the guy's name, but the GM, he was the guy who was in San Francisco. Baalke.
I didn't realize that Brady Quinn went off on this guy. I don't know if you heard his rant.
I didn't.
But he went off on Trent Baalke, and he said nothing will change in Jacksonville.
No, he's
while Trent Baalke's there. I didn't realize Baalke was a part of the 2 oustings of the 2 most recent coaches that got fired after 1 season, Chip Kelly and Tom Sula, in San Francisco.
And he was
also the guy that ran out Jim Harbaugh.
Because he's a cocky SOB. So here's the thing with the Jacksonville situation. It's really interesting, right? Because it appears as though it's a little bit like Chris Ballard and the Colts, and they're funny. They're both in the same division. Ballard, again, is another guy who's getting a long leash. Yeah. When it's like, what have you accomplished? You have not won the division in the 7 years you've been the GM. Yes, Andrew Luck retired. That was 7 years ago, and you've done nothing since. Like, you've tried to patchwork, and then you are the one who saddled Shane Steichen, a brilliant young offensive coach, with Anthony Richardson and said, make it work. Like, it's a real nightmare in the AFC South for those 2 organizations. Now, I will say, for Jacksonville, the problem is that they have Trevor Lawrence on this big deal, and they have a GM who a lot of coaches don't want to work with. Now, some young offensive coordinator will take that job, a Joe Cohen, a Joe Brady, someone who's like, I'll just say, screw it, whatever, give me Trevor Lawrence in that division, and I think I can win football games. Brian Thomas Jr., stud. I mean, what a great rookie season for him. And
I mean, it's important to note too that they didn't have Trevor for 7 games this year. Like, I know they were bad, and I know Trevor wasn't performing
but they put him on ice. They just were like, it's done. Put him on ice.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like there was a lot of like obstacles and adversity this year for Jacksonville. I do feel like they kind of laid it all at the feet of Peterson. I don't know if Peterson was the guy that was going to be what they needed throughout Trevor's contract, but I also feel like he was kind of a scapegoat.
Poorly constructed roster. It's going to be really interesting to see who they end up hiring. The problem was, right now, if I was the premier head coach or candidate of Vrabel or Johnson, right? Ben Johnson has only accepted interviews from Jacksonville and New England and Chicago. That's it. So he's not even talking to New Orleans. He's not even talking to the Raiders, to my knowledge, or the Jets. And so if you are someone who's keeping an eye on Jacksonville, you say to yourself, okay, where do I fall in the pecking order of some of these other choices? Jacksonville, I don't think is going to be a lot of people's first choice, but I think it's going to be a lot of people's second and third choice, because I can make the argument, if you don't take New England, and New England, Chicago to me are the best jobs. If you don't take either of those two, like if that's Ben Johnson, Chicago, Mike Vrabel in New England, Jacksonville to me immediately becomes, I think, the best opening. I like it better than the Jets. I like it better than the Saints because of the hell in the cap space. And I certainly like it better than the Raiders because look at what you're looking up at that division. So now the Bears, you could argue, look at what you're looking up in that division. Fair, but you have Caleb Williams. And you'll have a long leash. And you'll have a long leash with Caleb Williams.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to get to this. Just a quick minor breaking news. The NFL has announced that because of the wildfires in California, it could put the Monday Night Vikings-Rams game in jeopardy, in which case they will be moving it
to Vegas?
Phoenix.
Oh, Phoenix. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's horrible what's going on in Los Angeles right now. I mean, if you look at some of the photos and videos, like a war zone, it's just
brutal.
It's horrendous. It's shocking to me that here in the United States of America, we don't have the capability the
infrastructure
and to stop that. Especially it's just, that's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother thing, but it's really devastating. So thoughts with brutal. Those people.
Let's get to the New York Jets, 5-12 in Aaron Rodgers' year. They are in it's
a lot like the Raiders. I don't know what to say right now. A part of me says you'd be so like Garrett Wilson seems like he wants out. Again, that's so dumb. Don't favor Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams over Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is a top 10 wide receiver in his prime. Davante's still very good. Rodgers is a top 15 quarterback right now and shows flashes. But again, it was a horrific year for them. Them and the Bears. I mean, absolutely devastatingly disappointing years. And I don't know what else to say except to me, Aaron Glenn seems like the fit because he is the former player, defensive guy that can come in there with structure, energy. I played for this team. I have passion for this team, kind of like the Dan Campbell setup for the Detroit Lions. And that makes the most sense in my mind.
Yeah. No, I do agree with that. They're a team that I just feel like being 5-12 and being at the draft position they're in with 7th is kind of like one of the worst case scenarios. Like you either wanted to just like get the top 3 pick, or you wanted to be in the playoffs, in the back 7. But here you are at pick 7. Gonna have to make sure that this one counts. The Miami Dolphins 8-9, a weird year for them too. Obviously, Tua was injured for a good portion of it, comes back, and they rallied to try to get to the playoffs, but ultimately got eliminated. 8-9 finish for them. Honestly, man, I just kind of think the McDaniel thing, personally, I don't think it's working. There's a lot of takes to have about the Dolphins. I just went there because overall, I think I've seen enough to where I think he's probably an elite offensive coordinator in the NFL. I just don't know if he's a head coach long term. And I do think that that's kind of played a little bit into their collapses at times, and they're not ready to play on the road most times. Like they really don't elevate in those circumstances. And outside of a random game against Buffalo here or there, they really just kind of like win against bad teams and put up a lot of points.
Yeah, well, listen, Mike McDaniel didn't sign Tua. Mike McDaniel, when Tua plays,
that is true.
When Tua plays is well above 500. And so that's his biggest crutch. And if I'm Mike McDaniel, I'm going to the organization saying, you fucked me this offseason by getting rid of backup quarterbacks. And we had nothing when Tua went down. You signed Tua. It's your job now to go get me a legitimate backup quarterback or let me draft a kid in the second round. Like that's what they need to do. And if you're Tua, you just have to accept it and say, listen, we need to have a kid here that I can start developing. And if you're healthy for the next 3 years, then we'll end up trading him, right? He'll be a great asset. You could trade him or whatever. But we can't afford to keep doing this. I think Mike McDaniel fits still really well with Miami. I think Miami, just barely missing the playoffs, even though Tua missed a lot of games. Mike McDaniel's, I'm shocked you went that way. I think he's holding it together.
I think he's apathetic. I don't see like
he's not.
I just see kind of like, oh, he's like the cool guy, but he's like, hey, it's all good, bro. Like whatever. And I get that kind of fits the Miami vibe. I get that, but
the problem.
I mean, when you're talking about like leading NFL, team, that's why I just like they're not a physical group, but that usually comes from the,
Miami didn't win in cold weather before Mike McDaniel. Like they're not going to win in cold weather. If they hire Dan Campbell, they are not going to win in cold weather. Like it's like the Bears. Miami doesn't get thrown in a lot with the Jets Lions thing, but because they have the undefeated 72 Dolphins. But they're a lot more like the Chicago Bears than you should give them credit for. Look at their history. Again, like one Super Bowl win, a historic team that everyone talks about. They did have Dan Marino and like quarterback play, so that also like helps them. But overall,
massive 25 years,
massive underachievers who have a brand. The Bears brand is defense and really dysfunctional organization. Miami's brand is dysfunctional organization, and we can't win in December and January when it's cold, no matter who's our quarterback and who's coaching for us.
Yeah.
So I would argue if you're going to fire him, you need to go find your new absolute culture setter. Like they need to go then get Mike McDaniel's boss, like a Kyle Shanahan, someone who like, it doesn't matter, or like a Harbaugh, or like a Mike Tomlin, where it's like, I don't care what your history's been. I'm stronger than your history and your aura. Mm-hmm. So I'm not writing off Mike McDaniel. Again, I think they're in a similar situation to Arizona, right? You just kind of missed the playoffs, same record, same kind of quarterback we don't really believe in, same kind of coach got some questions about. If I was Miami's ownership group and leadership, I'd say to them both, listen, you're both in a prove-it year. We can move off a Tua way easier in a year from now. We can move up Mike McDaniel really easy in a year from now. Either earn those through playing through the rest of your contracts or an extension, or prove to us why one of you should be here and the other one shouldn't be here. I think Mike McDaniel is a guy who deserves maybe a quarterback who can play 17 games a season, but that's just me.
We did talk about the Colts. They finish 8-9. Anything else to add?
I would just say it sounds like they're committed to Anthony Richardson. I think that makes the most sense unless Sam Darnold becomes available. Honestly, or like Geno Smith. Like I think, and I know that sounds terrible because it's just like another like plug and play guy for the Colts. So maybe let's just stick with Sam Darnold. If they can go get the best quarterback available, like a Sam Darnold, that makes sense. Then you move off from Richardson. You could probably trade him somewhere and get a second rounder or a third rounder for him. Like you could get some value for him. I still think of him as a project that people would like to get their hands on. Otherwise, I think realistically, the Colts know they have a head coach they really like. They have pieces they really like. They're in a division that's really winnable, but they have an owner who is one of the bottom 7 or 8 owners in the league because he's just unreliable, off the hinges, druggy, guitars, weirdo. And you have a quarterback who's an absolute project that still just needs a lot of glue and a lot of construction paper. So they're going to be they're going to be an interesting offseason to see if they get aggressive or not. I think they should be aggressive, but does that mean aggressive in getting a new quarterback? I don't know.
Yeah, that's they have a lot of questions. I don't fault them for going to get Anthony Richardson. Like, they had to take shots, but it's just, you also have to be willing to
also
move
he's
on
different from what they had done, right? They had done stoic statue old white quarterbacks, so they tried something very different. I think the problem is they just went, Anthony Richardson isn't good enough. Let's just be honest. It doesn't look like he's good enough to be a consistent NFL starting quarterback.
The Bengals, man, as much, they're in the AFC North, obviously rival. I was rooting for them to make the playoffs. I said it here on the show.
Fun to watch.
I thought they deserved it. Like, I thought Joe and how good that offense is deserved to get in. It just didn't shake out that way, of course. Broncos taking care of business. But, I mean, I think if you're the Bengals, like, you had a historically bad defense for 90% of the season.
They already fired their DC.
I think you feel incredibly optimistic about where this offense is. Now you got to open up the wallet and pay Jamar and T. I think it would be malpractice if they didn't pay Jamar. I think for sure they'll pay Jamar. I don't think they'll pay T. I think he'll end up walking. But I think the offense is good enough. Joe Burrow is good enough to overcome that stuff. I'm starting to believe more in Zach Taylor, because that team could have folded easily and fallen apart.
They believe in him.
Yeah, and the defense played well the last month, and I think that has something to do with him too. So I think the Bengals are in a better place than maybe people give them credit for, I think.
Joe Burrow's season is arguably a top 10 statistical quarterback season of all time.
If they made the playoffs, MVP, right? Like,
absolutely,
he would have been the clear
MVP. Joe Burrow was the best quarterback in the NFL this year. They had the best wide receiver who won the Triple Crown in Jamar Chase. And I think Jamar Chase deserves a lot of credit, because he really, to me, showed why we would always say his 1B to Justin Jefferson. He was 1A this year. Like, he was the guy this year.
No,
and then they had the sacks leader. They had three of the most important. What do we always say? You need a quarterback, you need a weapon, and you need a guy who can go get their quarterback. They had all three, and they missed the playoffs. So organizationally, there's a fault there. They need to find a running back and a running game. I think they needed an interior offensive lineman, and they need a 3-down running back. They need to go find a stud. They need to go get Ashton Genty.
They need defense, man.
And then, of course, obviously, you need another pass rusher, and then you need at least two guys in the back end, like a stud corner and like a safety who you can rely on to put people in place. Those are some of the key pieces they're missing. But besides coaching hires, what the Cincinnati Bengals do with Chase and with T. Higgins is the most important thing we'll see this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm excited to see what Chase Brown does. I think he's going to be their featured guy next year. Out of Illinois, like I'm excited.
He came on late, but I just think, again, like, they look at what Detroit does, like getting a two-headed monster and getting someone who could take some pressure off of Joe more consistently is going to be really important.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, well, that wraps up the non-playoff contenders. Let's get to the matchups.
Let's do a little preview here.
Absolutely. All right, so. I'm going to go with the Saturday games first.
Yeah, let's go.
And then we'll get into the Sunday slate. So let's start with the 4:30 game on CBS, Texans and the Chargers. Texans playing host this game in Houston. Chargers coming in as a road favored by 3. So
games on CBS, you said? I think that's
CBS
also on
Paramount Plus as well.
Yes. Dan. This is the Houston Texan Invitational. They always play Saturday at 3:30 Central Time. That is just what they do. Listen, the Chargers should be the favorite. I think the Chargers will handle the Texans. The Texans, they've had a funky year. I mean, they are the stereotypical, like, they're not really a playoff team, but no one else in their division stepped up. Credit to them for being the most consistent team in their division. But listen, it was a real bad overall season for CJ Stroud. I know they had massive injuries. Tank Dell's injury is scary. They lost Stephon Diggs for the season. I don't think they have the firepower to compete with the Chargers. Look at what the Chargers do with Quentin Johnson in Week 18. Ladd McConkey's been maybe the second best rookie wide receiver in the NFL, third best, I would say, behind the two out of LSU. And then Justin Herbert playing really, really well. I would be, if I was a Chargers fan, I would be really, really devastated to lose this game. I think they should be the favorites. I think they are the favorites. If Houston wins at home, will I be shocked? No, but I'll be surprised.
I would be surprised too. The Chargers have a better team. They I think, have a better coaching staff overall, better defense, and better quarterback. So, I mean, when you can knock, a few of those boxes, you check a few of those boxes off, that bodes pretty well. Plus, it's not like a typical road environment. Chargers are used to playing in enclosed stadium. So I think there's a lot that works there. It should have been the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it's not. So did you
see the Chargers signed Ezekiel Elliott this week?
I did see that. Yes.
So I think again, you're going to see this Chargers team come out there and just say,
they're going to pound the rock.
We refuse to go down without running the ball 40 times. And I think this is an under game. I think CJ Stroud against that defense is going to be really tough to move the ball without two of his best weapons. You have Nico Collins, yes. You do have Joe Mixon, yes. But, I mean, I think they had those guys the last 3 weeks and they struggled offensively to score points. And so I think you're going to see a real low-scoring, physical football game, teams trying not to make the mistake. And I just think in the end, the Chargers on 3rd and 7, I trust them to convert a big 3rd and 7 with Ladd McConkey more so than I do the Houston Texans right now. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. Really great seeding matchup for the Chargers. A team 5 weeks ago, they were like, are they going to make the playoffs? They end up with the 5th seed because of the 4 losses in a row from Pittsburgh to end the season. Like, it just fell into their lap, and they also took it, though. Like, I mean, they dominated the Raiders in the final game of the season. Like, they went out and earned those 11 wins, and I'm excited for this game to see if the Chargers can put up a fight with the elite of the AFC. To me, it's like the 3 tiers. They're like in the 1 tier by themselves. And then it's like the lower tier of the AFC and then the elite tier. So which tier are they going to live in?
Yeah, I take the Chargers to win this game as well on the road. The only other team limping more into the playoffs is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Losers of 4 straight. Going into this one, now they go on the road. This is the night game there on Saturday, the Prime Video exclusive. So if you don't have a Prime account, you're going to have to go out and get that free trial or
get your Prime
do something there to get it going. Pittsburgh travels to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Ravens favored by 9.5. That's still kind of crazy to me, given the history of this matchup.
It's insane.
So that's insane. I mean, if you want to lay money on this game,
Pittsburgh
plus 9.5.
Pittsburgh plus 9 is the absolute play. Absolute play.
It's 100%.
Chris Boswell alone versus Justin Tucker, that's the matchup you got to feel good about as a Steelers fan.
No kidding. That should be on the cover of the matchup.
Dan, let me ask you, convince me why I would pick the Steelers to win this game. Sell me on it, because my gut, I'll tell you right now, my gut says the Steelers are limping. It's going to be physical, and I'm going to trust that Lamar is going to make the play. And I know that's maybe seems crazy because Lamar's playoff history is so-so. Now, he had one playoff games last year, made it to an AFC title game. I don't think it was necessarily his fault. The game plan fell apart the way it did at home against the Chiefs last year. So sell me. We're talking next week. The Steelers have moved on. They've beaten the Ravens. How did they do it?
How'd they do it? Yeah. Well, that's a tough position for me to be in because I'm not picking them to win this game. I'm picking them to cover, but I'm not picking them to win this game. I will be rooting like hell for them to win this game, and I do think they can. And so what goes right if Pittsburgh comes out with a victory? Well, it's actually really simple to me. It's Pittsburgh won the turnover battle. They got Lamar to throw an uncharacteristic pick. He's only thrown 4 picks this year,
dude.
He's accounted for 40 touchdowns.
He probably should win the MVP.
He probably
Josh
should.
Allen, but he probably should win the MVP.
So I think they win the turnover battle, and that's how this happens. Um, and I think that they control the clock, and those probably can work hand in hand. If you're turning them over, you're getting added possessions out of it. That's going to lend credence to it. But and I don't even think that necessarily has to be running the football, but they need to sustain some drives to keep Lamar off the field, but to also kind of wear this team down in general on the road to quiet the environment you're in, because it's going to be a tough one, and obviously it's a historic matchup. But I really do think this lays at the feet of winning of the turnover battle, and controlling the clock for however much time it is required to do so. You're going to have it possess the ball more than Baltimore in this game. But the one thing Pittsburgh has going for it in terms of what the Ravens are doing is that the Ravens won't have, it seems, Zay Flowers for this game. That's huge. I mean, that's a big offensive loss. What else do they have going for them? And to convince you of why the Steelers win this game would be they've won 8 of the last 10 matchups against this team. Lamar is 2-4 against Pittsburgh all time. Pittsburgh is 3-1 in the playoffs against the Ravens. So there's a lot of history there that does bode well. And I think in one of those things that you can't, have a tangible read on is the fact that now, and I feel like this is the lone bright spot I can take out of this horrible end of the season, is now you go into the playoffs like you are no longer the team with the pressure. That you've lost 4 in a row. Going into it, you had the pressure of you had to win the division. Like, come on, guys, it's right there for the taking. You can compete for the 1 seed. But then that slowly went away. And while that was demoralizing, it also alleviated all of the pressure. You can stroll into this game against Baltimore knowing Lamar's got the guy that hasn't won the big game. This is a team that is at home. They are 9.5-point favorites. Everyone's going to pick them to win this game.
And Tomlin is hyping them up.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's a
Mike
classic
Tomlin
game
underdog.
Where the Steelers could rise to the occasion and win a game. I still would feel very upset overall at how the season ended. But if they win this game and then go lose to Buffalo next week, I can't necessarily say I'm totally disappointed, because if you told me before the season that it ended with a playoff victory against Baltimore, you'd probably take that.
Dan,
but just real quickly, I think the Ravens win because it's pretty simple. They just are a better football team. They're a better football team, and Russ is not processing plays. They're not running the football very well. No. They are being overly prideful. It's a Mike Tomlin staple. They will not move off Najee Harris. Jaylen Warren is the better running back. He just
so
is.
Wild.
So for those reasons, unless something changes, I think Baltimore will win this game.
I keep telling people, if there's one football game you can watch this weekend, it's Ravens and Steelers. This is the best game of the weekend. I truly believe
it's an exciting matchup. Yeah,
it is the most. To me, it's the most consequential as well, because there's talk about Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game in how many years, and even that last playoff game he won, it was against. It was like a backup quarterback, right?
Cincinnati,
it was like, who had to go to their backup quarterback. It's a really weird spot to be in. And then if you're Baltimore, you can't lose at home after winning the division. Lamar Jackson, this type of season, you said it, only 4 interceptions, 40 something touchdown passes. And you're going to lose week in the wild card weekend. You're going to go home against your division rival, who you're 2-4 against historically. Whoever loses this game, and if they lose it in a blowout, if Pittsburgh goes in there and wins 27-13, and Lamar poops his pants, like, you're not moving on from Lamar. So what do? Do you tell? Does John Harbaugh go to the management and say, "Listen, we need to do a mutual parting of the ways"? Because maybe John Harbaugh gets fed up. Like, I've done everything I can. Like, I can go take any job I want. I can take any media job I want. I need to reset after a year like this, because you're not getting rid of Lamar. And if the flip side happens, if you are Pittsburgh and you go in there and you get blasted 30-13 and it's not close, maybe Mike Tomlin says, listen, I can't do this anymore. Maybe the Steelers look at Mike and say, Mike, we just need to
mutual part
ways. Yeah. And if either of those things happen, those guys would immediately become the number one desired coach ahead of Vrabel, ahead of Ben Johnson.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I do think there's a possibility, small, of it happening, because I think it's actually, because I predict the game's going to be close. I think it's going to be 23-20, real bloodbath of a game. I might just bet the Steelers money line, because I think.
Well, yeah, you might as well at that point, right? Because
it's, to me, the more fun thing to root for. It's just like they're going to get good odds in your favor. It's a 9-point.
Yeah.
And I think FanDuel's doing like live odds boosts and stuff like that. I definitely think Pittsburgh to cover is the play, and I can't wait to watch this game. Like, if my wife said, Mark, you can only watch one game this weekend, I'd be like, oh, Saturday night, I want Steelers Ravens. It's the one that I'm so fascinated to see how it turns out. The other games, obviously, I think there could be upsets. I think it's less likely. This is the one I think it's more likely it's a legitimate upset, because, as you said, Lamar's playoff record is tough, and his literal record against Steelers is tough. And in the AFC North, if you're a road underdog, you win games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's there are things going in Pittsburgh's favor for this one. And like we've mentioned, Mike Tomlin is as good as anybody at motivating and getting them to play above their level for big moments and big games. It just hasn't happened in 7 years in terms of the playoffs. So they're going to have to, dig deep and figure something out to be able to get a win. And as per your, scenario there, if they get blown out and all of that, and Mike Tomlin, what's his status? I have kind of a rant waiting and ready to go. I want to see the season through, and I want it to play out as it is before I discuss on the show my thoughts entirely. But I just will say that, Grace asked me, would you rather them just get blown out and be like, you know what, they weren't going to win anyway, instead of like getting your hopes up? And I was like, you know what? No, like I want them to lose like a close game if they're going, because then it shows me that they're like, they had fight. They were in it. They belonged, because right now, like, it feels like they don't belong in the playoffs, like with how poorly
it's such a bad end of the season.
So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the Bills and Broncos. That's the CBS game there on January 12th. On Sunday, Buffalo 8.5-point favorites. So that's funny. The Ravens are 9.5-point favorites against a team that's beats them consistently. The Bills are only 8.5-point favorites against the visiting Denver Broncos. This again on CBS, 1:00 Eastern time. I think the Bills win, but I also do think that the Broncos score a lot in this game. I actually think it's going to be pretty high scoring.
Yeah, the Broncos offense has been playing really, really well. I think they're going into a buzzsaw. I think that atmosphere is going to be electric. I don't think Bills fans sell tickets. I think it's going to be a real home field advantage. I get the sense that Buffalo is on a mission, and I get the sense that if the Broncos, in my head, I'm like just picturing the Broncos win the toss, they defer, they kick it to Buffalo. 3 plays later, the Buffalo Bills score in like a big touchdown to Shakir. And it's like that place just freaking erupts. And all of a sudden it's like halftime, it's 24-7. And you're like, Dad, this game was never supposed to be close. But I also could see, like you said, Denver scoring. And if things start off tight for Buffalo, then I think it's a closer game, and maybe they cover, but the Bills win and end up taking care of business. Either way, it's a nerve-wracking spot for both of the 2 seeds in the AFC and NFC. These are not the easiest matchups in the world. And you absolutely can say to yourself, I think the Broncos have the better coach. And I think they have a coach who's frankly more built for these moments. And that's going to play a really interesting dynamic in this. I don't know what the weather will be like, but it's Denver. It's not like they're playing, Miami or something like that. And you could say, hey, we have a real Buffalo weather advantage as well. So I think it's going to be a good game, a close game, but Buffalo takes care of business in the end, and Josh Allen has himself a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the Ravens. There's pressure on Baltimore or Buffalo.
Oh yeah,
to continue the run, right? I mean, for them, it's not just about winning in the wild card round. I mean, they need to once again get to the championship game and get over the hump. But
yeah,
it starts here, right? And so like there is pressure. It's like you gotta start the journey with a win, and there's a lot of pressure there. But I do agree that the Broncos are not the easiest matchup here for the Bills, but the Bills will win. And
if you want to keep your job in the AFC, then you have two options: beat Patrick Mahomes or lose to Patrick Mahomes. Those are your only options. You're not getting fired because you lose to Patrick Mahomes, right? Like you'll get fired if you're, if you go in there and you're, and your DeMeco Ryans get blown out at home. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he would get fired, but like, you know what I mean? Like that's
a scenario that could,
that's the type of things. Yeah. You get fired because you lose to Bo Nix at home.
The other game, you mentioned, if you want to watch a game this weekend, obviously I would pick Steelers Ravens, but for me, Eagles Packers would probably be my second choice.
Do we have a Jalen Hurts concussion update?
I don't. I'm going to look it up right now and see if there is the latest.
Yeah, look it up because
obviously that would determine a lot.
This is the game on Fox.
That's correct.
And I will say that to me, this is
Wednesday's injury report today. Shout out Trevor Keegan, by the way. He's
Chris
on
Lake
here.
South.
Chris Lake South native. I don't see. Oh, Jalen Hurts. He was a limited participant. So I think you can participate in a limited capacity
if we're in protocol, but I don't know if he's past protocol yet. It's crazy because that's a concern, right? Like he hasn't played in what 2 weeks now, and he's dealing with the concussion. Now Jordan Love is beat up here. He kind of hit his elbow and like a funny bone injury. They're without Christian Watson. Dan, who would have thought?
Sal Paolantonio said if it's a 5-step process, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's a 5-step process. He's between 4 and 5. It's basically what Sal Paolantonio reported
it's gotta
today.
Feel good.
So I think he's going. Yeah.
I hope so, because again, I would agree with you. It's the next best game that we have, and it's the rematch of the Brazil game from week 1. Remember that Friday night to start the NFL season, it was Chiefs Ravens on Thursday night, Packers Eagles in Brazil. We were talking about don't wear your green or the gangs will kill you. That feels like a lifetime ago. And so I'll say this. I'm rolling with Philly. Now you're going to say, Mark, you're a Bears fan. You're just hating on the Packers. Talking about another team that's kind of limped into the playoffs. The Packers losing 2 straight, losing to 2 divisional opponents.
Talking about a banged up quarterback as well.
Banged up quarterback. And the problem that I'm seeing with the Packers is, well, yeah, the run game is really good, and Josh Jacobs has been great. But Dan, what does that get you if you can't stop Philly? If Philly goes down there and with their electric offense and Saquon busts off an 80-yard run, or a big bomb to AJ Brown, and all of a sudden you're up 14-0 on the Packers at home. Oh, great, run it with Josh Jacobs. Well, when you put Jordan Love in the situations where it's like all on Jordan Love, he makes mistakes. And I saw it with my own eyes when the Packers were at home against the Bears. We didn't recap that win for the Bears, but the Bears couldn't put pressure on anyone all season. And yet they were going into fuck it mode and putting pressure on Aaron Rodgers. Vic Fangio selectively knows how to bend and not break and how to put pressure on. That's what Vic Fangio does. He's not going to let them get over the top. They're not. If they're going to score, it's going to be on 11 and 12 play drives. I don't trust Jordan Love on 11 and 12 play drives. He's not that guy yet. He might not ever be that guy. He's a lot more like Brett Favre, where it's like boom, pow, explosive, pew, 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 and beating you over the top. And then, Josh Jacobs comes and hammers the rock as well. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a back and forth game. I think it's going to be a fun game. If Jalen Hurts is healthy and playing, though, I think the Eagles are just way too talented to lose at home against a Packers team that's limping in.
That's it. I mean, the Eagles are the most talented team, top to bottom, in this entire playoff field. And so I think, I mean, we'll get to my thoughts in future shows as we kind of get through this. Obviously, the Eagles will have to win for that to come to fruition, but I think they're about to go on a tear. Like, they, as long as Jalen Hurts is healthy and running this team, they have all of the pieces to absolutely go back to the Super Bowl with who they have to work with. It's just they're just so far and above more talented than this entire NFC slate, and there's something to be said for that when it comes to the early matchups, let alone getting to the championship games. Bucks and Commanders for Sunday night.
Commanders
Tampa
at
Bay or Commanders at Bucks, excuse me,
on NBC, right?
Tampa Bay, yes, NBC Peacock. Tampa Bay favored by 3. I'm taking Tampa Bay in this one, and I would actually take Tampa Bay to cover.
I was just about to say I'm taking Tampa in the points. Washington is really fun, and Jaden will keep them involved, and he will keep it interesting. But Dan, look at Washington down the stretch. Who have they really beaten?
Exactly.
Nobody. Now they beat the Eagles.
And they've had some real questionable stretches.
They beat the Eagles, but they lost. That's the game that they lost Jalen Hurts, and they lost him early in that game. And again, real questionable losses. You're right as well. And I mean, so as much as they are the Texans of last year, they're the surprise story with the new coach, new quarterback. I think it ends here on wildcard weekend. The Bucks, listen, this is a Bucks team that beat Philadelphia last year at home when no one was picking them to win anything, and they were kind of like, oh, who cares? The Bucks made the playoffs. Tom Brady, Baker 1 year thing. This is now a real thing with the Bucks. They're an experienced veteran team who's healthy at the right time. They have a great running back in Bucky Irving. They have a great wide receiver in Mike Evans, who's healthy. They have a quarterback who threw 41 touchdown passes and 4,500 yards, who is cocky as all hell. The Bucks, to me, are a dark horse in the NFC playoffs. I think they win. I think they win pretty easily. I think if there's a blowout this weekend, I think they get to. I think that Todd Bowles dials some things up, and I think that they're able to handle business. I like the Bucks to win, something along the lines of like 27-17, but maybe it's not that close, like a late touchdown for Washington, and they handle business at home.
Yeah, I'm right along the lines with you there. And the Commanders, again, we've said it many times, but I feel like this is such a huge win for them. Regardless, you're playing a playoff game with your rookie quarterback. It's great. It's great. And I think you've got the coach to do it. Vikings go on the road at the Rams. Tightest spread here for this week. Minnesota favored by a single point.
Yeah.
The Vikings favored by a single point.
So I guess the Chargers
and this is a close matchup.
Road favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So we've got two road favorites.
Monday night in Phoenix.
Monday night game, ESPN, potentially in Phoenix. Very interesting game here. I'm really like, all these games are great. Like, I'm excited to watch every single one of them, but I do feel that the way the Vikings ended the year, they're gonna kind of have like a renewed vigor for this one. The question is going to be Sam Darnold, though, because it's like he's a guy that you can win by. You've seen it this year, and it hasn't happened much, but you can lose, with Sam Darnold because of Sam Darnold. And so that's going to be scary. Their game plan is really going to have to, be tightened up here, and they're going to have to rely on Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. They're going to need the big play, but I do think the way their defense is playing, to me, is the difference maker in this matchup. I take Minnesota's defense over the Rams.
Oh, well, yeah. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, their performances this weekend will affect their legacy. Sam Darnold's performance this weekend could affect $100 million. It's that substantial. And then also impact, obviously, his legacy and where he goes from here. Man, this is a neutral.
The Rams are like your team too. Like they've been your team like.
And you know what?
Year.
I will say this: that Vikings team almost lost to the Bears. The first time they played. That Vikings team, they handled the Packers really well. But again, I think that's more the Packers are falling apart. They got shellacked by Detroit in Detroit. They've had some up and downs here at the end of the year, but this is a 14-win team.
And the problem is, like, their defense is so good at, like, the blitz packages and getting quarterbacks off kilter, but quarterbacks like Jared Goff and Matt Stafford process pretty quickly.
Stafford,
so that is going to be
hangs
tough.
in there and just takes shots. It's just fuck it. I'm only.
And they've got dudes. I mean, they got Nacua and Kupp out there, and Higbee's back healthy. Kyren Williams, it's going to be a very interesting matchup. There's a reason it's a 1-point spread.
Well, I think Vegas is right there. It's going to be.
I wouldn't bet this game. Yeah.
I'm
going to take the Vikings to win, though.
I'm going to take the Rams. I'll be on the Rams. I think here's why I think the Rams win. I think they were smart to rest their guys, and they get to go into the postseason as even though they're going to be on the road, home, rested, and no pressure. The Vikings are not rested, a little licking their wounds from going from maybe the 1 seed in division champs to now going to Arizona to play a Rams team.
It's not set in stone just yet, but it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, and or going to LA. And so I think there's a little bit of that kind of cockiness too from Sean McVay. He can say to his guys all week, we're underdogs and I don't give a fuck. People said we should have played you all so we could have got the 3 seed to avoid playing the Vikings or the Lions. Fuck that. Like if he's smart and he's motivating him that way, that goes a long way in these situations. As a Mike Tomlin guy, your best chance to win is Mike Tomlin's motivation being 9-point underdogs. Like that's how you win. And I think there's something to that. Now, if the Vikings come out and they're just unstoppable, it wouldn't shock me. But the Rams can hang with unstoppable because Nacua and Kupp, Higbee, Kyren Williams, and obviously, to me, the better quarterback in this game is Matt Stafford. So, and a coaching staff and a quarterback who just won a Super Bowl a couple of years and have been in these high-pressure games. And we see Matt Stafford, even against Detroit last year, at Detroit in the first round of the playoffs, he played his balls off in a high-pressure situation. And again, not healthy. This is the healthiest.
Who's going to crack under pressure, and so, we can see Sam doing that.
I'm going to go. I'll go with the Rams, but won't be shocked to the Vikings.
All right. Yeah. So the one departure here on the show is the Rams Vikings matchup. That's kind of fitting that it comes down to that. But yeah, the 2 upsets that I have is Vikings over Rams and Chargers over Texans. You have the 1 upset being the Chargers over the Texans as well. Neither of us would be shocked if the Steelers are.
I may take the Steelers. I'll let you know. Follow my tweets. I may be posting a Steelers money line bet. I just fuck it. I think
absolutely.
Lamar is so untrustworthy, and again, NFC North underdog on the road.
No, you got to take it. By the way, we'll leave with this because this is really funny. Ian Rappaport tweeted, Bills quarterback Josh Allen, when asked what OC Joe Brady has brought to the offense this year, quote, nothing. Teams should stay away from him.
I like that. I like that for 2 reasons. Because Josh is obviously doing a solid for his guy, but he's also being honest in the sense of like, no, fuck, I don't want to lose this guy.
He's genuinely he's being mildly serious when he says that. All right, well, hey, that was a great show, man. Best show of the year. We're gonna keep having great shows the rest of the way because these are always fun.
The nice thing is, next week we get to react to the playoffs and then also preview, like we then know immediately what happens next. So that show will be really fun. And only thing if there's breaking big coaching news, we'll get that stuff out of the way. But otherwise, we'll be all in on the games from here on out.
Absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate you all following along throughout the entire season, and we hope you stick with us throughout the playoffs. Again, if you like what you hear and see, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you're watching on YouTube, click that bell. It will give you a notification anytime we go live here, and you can, engage with us live during these shows. We do them every week here on the Football Lounge, even in the off season. But we're looking forward to a great playoff run here. We are part of the For Frequency's Sake podcast network. Plenty of other great shows to listen to there as well. So go check us out over at ForFantasySakeQC.com. We'll see you back here next week with a lot to talk with you about regarding the wildcard round and looking ahead to the divisionals.
has been a For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency's Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.